Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So today we are looking at rebuilding a deck that we built a while back that we had called Sera Swarm, and the deck list performed really well. Sera Swarm feels like it came up, it was really popular, and then it kind of died off. Only the effectiveness or efficiency of the deck list never really went away. Even though we don't have a Hell Cow anymore for that really strong 6 power card, we have a lot of really strong units and strong options for this deck list. And so honestly, I think that the Sera build is still probably one of the most efficient builds at this point in time because it's going to be able to push power consistently. So to be able to have a very consistent cube gain, you're not going to win every single game with this, but you know more or less what power level you're going to be able to bring to the board every single game. There's no high rolls where you have to retreat and then you end up getting like 6 low rolls in a row that you end up kind of tilting and then you just kind of start spewing cubes. This one is going to perform very consistently at doing a pretty high power level. Of course, if your opponent gets a high roll, you're not going to be able to win, but you're going to be able to win almost every other match if they just have like an okay or an average gameplay. So running through the entire deck list really quickly. First up, we have Ant-Man. He's going to be a pretty cheap drop. We can drop him early, and whenever we fill up the lane, which we tend to fill up almost every single lane with this deck list, we will be able to get +3, so he becomes a 5 power 1 cost card. So for a cost to power ratio, it's enormous. We have Angela as one of the bread and butter, as one of the high power plays from this deck list. So we're going to be able to have a 2 cost 7 power if we drop 3 cards in her lane, which we always will. We want to drop her in an empty lane first, and then we'll eventually fill it up. She'll become a 2 cost 7 power card, which again, similar to Ant-Man, for the cost to power ratio is insane. Next up, we have Mojo. So Mojo we are typically going to hold until the very end of the game, one of the last few turns. Once we know that they have a location capped out, we can then drop Mojo to make sure that we consistently trigger his ongoing ability of if both players have 4 cards at this location plus 6 power. And as we're going to be saying for most of these cards, that becomes a 2 cost 8 power card, which with the cost to power ratio, it's phenomenal. An 8 power card is good even up to most 4 cost cards. And so to be able to sneak that out with a 1 cost card, or if we drop Sera, a 1 cost card, is huge. Next up, we have Scarlet Witch. So Scarlet Witch is going to, with Sera, be reduced down. Most likely, we're just going to drop her into an unfavorable lane to shift it. So right now, that means that if we're not capping out Fisk Tower, we are going to drop Scarlet Witch into Fisk Tower to change it, similarly with Death's Domain and other ones that have a negative effect. Next up, we have a pool 3 card of Mysterio. So Mysterio is going to create a token of himself in each of the lanes that he's able to be played in. So if you can play him naturally in that lane, he will create a token. Now, he's not going to be able to be played into a Sanctum Sanctorum or a lockdown flooded lane because you wouldn't be able to naturally play him. But Mysterio has a really good interaction with our Angela and with our Bishop. Each of the tokens that get dropped, so you play this 2 cost card that's 5 power, he's going to buff Bishop 3 times or trigger Bishop's ability 3 times. Even if it's the fake token, he will trigger the Angela buff, and then later on for a more expensive card, that fake token will trigger our rescues on reveal ability without having to invest more power into that lane. Next up, we have Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane is just a really good lane cap card. So if we drop this into a lane that is otherwise full, this will become a 3 cost 7 power card, which is a pretty good power push. It's not game breaking or game defining, but it can help you push a lead and extend it so that you can keep and hold the lead. We then have Bishop. Bishop is going to grow stronger for every single card we play. And so with this deck list, we are typically going to play anywhere from 6 to 10 additional cards after he's dropped for some really big upside and an average power level of between 8 and 12, which for a 3 cost card, again, is huge. We have Cosmo. So let's say that we are running up against the Wong Mystique Spectrum combo. We can drop Cosmo into the Wong lane. We can drop Cosmo into the Invisible Woman lane. This is going to allow us to stop that really impactful owner availability. So if they're doing a Hella discard and they hide their cards behind Invisible Woman, Cosmo is going to trigger and stop those owner reveals from happening. And then we have the newly buffed or reduced cost Rescue. So Rescue at 4 cost feels a lot more usable. So we can either follow up on turn 5 with a Sera, with a Magik, with an Iron Man, or if we don't have those or we want to play something lower, We can follow up on turn 5 with like a Mysterio and a Wolfsbane, Mysterio and a Cosmo, and then the Mysterio token will make sure that Rescue becomes a 9 power card by triggering that on reveal ability. And so with every other card in this deck list besides maybe Cosmo, the cost to power ratio is enormous. So 4 costs for 9 power is pretty good. The only thing that really beats it on average is a Devil Dino, and that has to be built specifically around having a lot of cards in your hand. Next up we have Iron Man. Iron Man is going to be one of those either lane cap or end of game drops that is going to accelerate the power level in one of our lanes. He can be used to help propel our 20 power lane into a 40 power lane to make sure that we win that specific location, and is just a good overall card to drop late game with how much power we're going to have out on the board. And then we also have Magik in this deck list, which is much different than what we ran originally, but Magik in this deck list is going to allow us to do something kind of cool. We can do Sera on 5, Magik on 6. That is going to allow us to drop 7 energy worth of cards. So if that is 2 cards, technically it should have been 9 energy. So we could do something like an Iron Man and a Wolfsbane. We could do any number of cards. This kind of combo is going to allow us to, 1, see what the enemy's last turn or late game play was, and then additionally it's going to let us maneuver power and push a large amount of power specifically where we need it. And then lastly we have Sera. Sera is the bread and butter of this deck list. If we draw into either Sera or Magik, that is going to be enough for us to push a lot of power onto the board by giving us that last turn or that last push into the final turn. Sera is going to especially enable this because Sera is going to reduce the cost of cards in our hand by 1. So if we drop her on 5, we're going to be able to do a Magik and then a Wolfsbane on 6, or a Magik and a Bishop, a Magik and a Cosmo on 6 to try to stop their on reveal ability. We can also extend the game, which get a lot of upside out of Sera. And then Sera is going to also, if we're not going to extend the game, enable us to drop anywhere from 3 to 5 cards on the last turn for a huge late game power push that's really hard to anticipate. We can optimally or efficiently drop our power into the lanes where we most need it. And so that is the rundown of this deck list. We are going to go ahead and jump in. This one feels incredibly phenomenal. It feels incredibly consistent, and I'm looking forward to bringing you some high quality games. So first up we have Karsamir. And our starting hand, we do have Ant-Man. I don't know that we necessarily need to play Ant-Man just yet. We're going to actually hold it for now. We don't want to accidentally get it destroyed in Hala. We don't want to play it into a suboptimal lane. And then we can always change a location with our Scarlet Witch. I think we're going to wait and one additional turn to drop our Bishop. We're going to try to have at least this squirrel destroyed potentially. That's not bad either. So we could drop Bishop, which will duplicate. And then we can start naturally dropping our cards, only dropping our high power cards in like a Rescue or an Iron Man to finish off and cap out Sinister London. That way we can get the upside of playing the cards naturally, which will buff Bishop up. And so they drop a Carnage, which is going to retain that Carnage buff or that power buff, and then it jumps over into Hala, which is phenomenal. And I didn't think about Sinister London potentially pushing our card over into Hala here. So luckily it doesn't. Now that we have the double Bishop, we don't necessarily need to duplicate our cards. Do we consider doing this? This would allow us to drop as many cards naturally onto the board, which will each trigger and buff up our Bishop. We don't have any of our large, high impactful cards in hand, so I don't think we necessarily need to duplicate any cards. So we're just going to do the Scarlet Witch this turn. So they end up dropping a Squirrel Girl. They hit it with a Deathlock. If they have a death, it is basically going to be free. They were probably anticipating dropping death into the Sinister London to duplicate it, but since we're going to change that location, it works better for them than it does for us, and so we want to get rid of it. And so this turn, we're going to drop our Sera. We can pretty much dump the rest of our hand onto the board next turn, and we'll see how it goes. So they kill our Rescue, not anything huge. Ooh, and so they get a Moon Girl. So they are going to have the double death here, which is a really high roll style of play. So we have Iron Man now. We could push to win Nidavellir. This would give us 17 power extra here for a total of 22. If they drop their 12 cost card here, if they drop one of their deaths here, that's not going to do it for us. But what if we did something like our Iron Man here? We can then do Wolfsbane here. Oh, that's not great either. We can do Ant-Man here, and we can do Mysterio here. That will buff it up the same. We get some additional upside in our bishop here. Ant-Man is going to be an additional +3. So unless they double stack their deaths in Nidavellir, I think we win with this play line. I think this is more beneficial for us. So if they split their deaths here, they do. Perfect. So I anticipate a double death. Yep, perfect. So we drop the Iron Man. We drop the real Mysterio, which is going to be another 10 power. And so we're going to come up over them in the Nidavellir lane. We're going to come up over them in Central Park. We, of course, gave up on Hala. We adjusted. We found the play line that was going to work most optimally. And so with this, we're going to add 10 more. It makes us 28 and 36. We come in for the huge win against even the high roll Moon Girl double death opponent. And so we're going to try and keep this going. So far, so good. All right. So next up we have Sovereign, and we don't have anything to drop on this first turn, but that's okay. Typically we want to hold our resources until late game. They end up dropping an Ant-Man. The second location is Lemuria. We can use that to potentially drop a Scarlet Witch. We can hide it. I think we drop our Scarlet Witch into the Avengers compound. Part of me wants to hold it for an additional turn in case this is a negative location. Other part of me doesn't like Avengers compound and being forced to drop our cards there on turn 5. So we are going to go with the Scarlet Witch play, which may not be the most ideal, but it does end up paying off for us. So we end up flipping into Olympia. So we draw 2 additional cards. Our hand is maxed out now, so we can drop our Cosmo somewhere. We could drop our Mojo. I think we go with Cosmo instead, but if they're running an ongoing style deck, maybe we want to hold it strategically. We will drop our Ant-Man and our Mojo. So if they want to trigger the Ant-Man ongoing bonus, they're going to have to cap out this lane. We can then follow up and cap it out as well to get the upside from our Mojo. So just in case they're running an ongoing style deck, we want to hold our Cosmo to be able to use it consistently to stop the Wong Spectrum interaction. They have a bishop, so I think they're probably more so running a Zoo style deck. We're going to go ahead and drop our rescue. Next turn, we can drop Mysterio if we don't want to drop Sera naturally into Lemuria. We could drop Mysterio, which would trigger the on-reveal ability of our rescue here. So they drop Daredevil, they drop Korg, and they drop Iceman. So they are definitely going with a flood the board style deck list. So with Daredevil, do they have a Professor X? If so, we have to worry about really all 3 of the lanes. So if that is the case, I think we're going to play our real Mysterio into the left-hand side, which will trigger the rescue bonus. Actually, let's go ahead and play Bishop into Olympia, followed by the Mysterio here. That is going to buff up Bishop 3 times. We're going to push over their power level into Olympia. We're going to have the real Mysterio here. We're going to have the buffed up rescue here. If they do have a Professor X, they're not going to be able to use it here. Unfortunately, we're not dropping our Sera, which we would ideally want to drop instead, but I think this is the safer play line just in case they have something that's just really, really hard to compete with. And so they don't know which Mysterio is which. So we're using, and I saw a post on Reddit, we're using the same tactic that Yugi used against Pegasus in like the super early days of Yu-Gi-Oh, where Pegasus could see the cards and he used, I think it was Magic Hat, to hide which card was really real. Yeah. So they drop a Khazar and they follow it up with a Nightcrawler as well. So they have a pretty decent Olympia lane right now. They are going to be able to move Nightcrawler out if we end up being over their power level here. But with the +3 and the +6 from Ant-Man and Mojo, it's a pretty good likelihood, at least for now, that we will be. And then if they move it out, we lose the +6 bonus on Mojo, but we're going to be buffing up our Bishop, so we may be able to kind of get to that point anyways. And so even though Mysterio is showing as in our hand, there's a weird interaction with Daredevil and Mysterio where it still shows you having a Mysterio in your hand, but it's not one that you can play. So anyone that sees that and is like, why do you have a Mysterio? We don't really have a Mysterio. I would ideally want to drop more than 1 card this turn, but since we can't, I think we do our Iron Man into the Gia, and then we follow up with a Rock into the mid location. They don't know for sure where Mysterio's power was, and so they wouldn't know necessarily where to invest those resources. And as long as we could keep and win Olympia, we were going to be able to use Iron Man to push our 5, 6, 7, 8 up to 16, most likely be able to cap out the Gia there. But they do end up retreating, and so we are now 2-0. Next up we have Wintnell, and the first location is Sewer System, which is not great. We're going to hold our Ant-Man for the first turn just to get an idea of where would be better to play him. We are going to go ahead and drop him on turn 2. We don't want to hold our resources too long, just in case we need to flood the board. We don't want to have too many cards in our hand. The Sanctum Sanctorum is tough for us. We don't have any way to push power or move power over. We just have to worry about winning the lanes that are available. So we're going to play Cosmo into the sewer system. No, we're going to play Cosmo into Titan here. We're going to see if maybe they had an on reveal ability that they were going to want to trigger. So we hit their Lockjaw lane. So if they do have on reveal cards, they're going to have a hard time following up with them. We're going to go ahead and drop Rescue this turn. I think we avoid dropping the Bishop. It's not going to end up getting that large or too incredibly large. They do drop Jubilee into the sewer system, which they were going to rotate in Titan, but because of our Cosmo, they had to kind of shift that area of play just a little bit. And so they pulled into a Wolfsbane, which didn't hit anything great, but if they follow up with an Odin, then it'll re-trigger. They'll be able to buff up further. We're going to play our Sera here. That is going to allow us to play more expensive cards on the last turn. Plus, it triggers our rescue bonus here. And so we want to get a good idea of if they're going to cap out a lane. And if they do, then we can drop our Mojo somewhere. We can drop Mojo, cap it out with Wolfsbane to have a really high power lane and a really high power push. So then they do Gambit, unfortunately, discards their Magik, and then it hits our Cosmo. So that is kind of unfortunate. Do we extend the game by 1? I think they get more upside out of a game extension than we do. So what we can do instead is we can do Bishop, we can then drop our Mojo, we can drop Wolfsbane to finish capping out this location. We can do a Scarlet Witch to shift this one. There's no telling what it's going to end up being, but I think that's probably our best bet. They may have something like a White Tiger that would push power over into the Sanctum Sanctorum. Ooh, so they don't end up capping out the sewer system. Interesting. Are they going to be pushing power into the Sanctum Sanctorum? And if so, then we end up losing. So they have an Ironheart, which buffs up some of their cards. What is this last card? It flips into Mr. Negative. So they were running a negative deck. Unfortunate. Then they do an Angela, which then flips into just a random card, and it's a White Tiger. But it pushes it over into the sewer system, which then triggers our Mojo buff to give us a 13 power win in sewer system. They only have a 4 power win in the Strange Academy, so they had a very, very solid possibility of White Tiger pushing that power into Sanctum Sanctorum, at which point they would have won. What a wild ride, Wintnell. What a wild ride. All right, so next up we have Pack USA. We're going to go ahead and pass on turn 1. Even though we have an additional energy, we don't have anything great to play. Depending on what they drop and what it looks like they're playing, will determine when we start dropping our resources and where we drop them. So next turn, we're going to be able to do a Cosmo if we wanted to, but it's going to depend on if it looks like they're running an on-reveal style deck, or what it... Ooh, so they drop two 1-cost cards here, both of which have an on-reveal ability. I wonder if they're running like a Beast deck, and they're going to pull those back into their hand, or if they're just okay with where that's at. With Iceman, our Cosmo gets hit, so we're not going to be able to drop Cosmo this turn. I don't feel like dropping Mysterio is a good play. With the spare token going into the Superflow, it would end up disrupting our energy draw, and so then we would end up with 1 less energy each turn than Pack USA has. So they do a Cable, so they're going to be able to mill us potentially with the cloning vats. I'm going to go ahead and drop Cosmo here. They're probably going to drop Cable. It's going to trigger before our Cosmo does. Oh, so there is the Cable. And is this a Mantis as well? No, it's a Beast to pull them back into their hand. So they are running a Beast style deck. So if we can drop the Cosmo here, we can drop another one into the Baxter building to stop them from stealing all of our cards. But I think instead, we're going to go with the Sera play here. That's going to allow us to start really pumping out power. So they have the double Cable that they throw into the Superflow. And then they also have a Beast, right? No, a triple Cable. Oh my Lord, have mercy on my soul. So they have our entire deck now. Oh, congratulations, Pack USA. But a 6-power lane is not difficult to beat necessarily. We're going to go ahead and we'll drop Bishop over into the Superflow. We drop our Mysterio token into Baxter building. It'll push a token here and here. We can't do Cosmo necessarily because it won't trigger. We can do an Ant-Man, and we can do a Wolfsbane here. That's going to give us a pretty good spread of power. We're going to get the Ant-Man back into our hand. That way we can drop both Iron Man and Ant-Man next turn. We could potentially look for like a Bishop play, but we're just dropping so many cards. I don't want to avoid or miss that Bishop buff for all of these units and all of these cards. So they do have a Beast if they decide to use it. If I was them, I probably wouldn't. It's pretty late in the game to be dropping a Beast. We do duplicate the Ant-Man in cloning vats. We didn't do Wolfsbane because it wouldn't trigger. The on reveal wouldn't trigger. So they extend the game with Magik here. Okay, so we do have a plain Mysterio token if we decided we ever wanted to use it. So that allows us to do some more strategic plays. We can do Iron Man, which is going to give us a huge power level here. We can do Ant-Man, and then they know we'll have an additional Iron Man. They just won't know where we're going to drop it. And they don't know that we have the additional 5 power Mysterio token either. I'm going to go ahead and snap here. I feel pretty confident, even though they have all of our cards, a huge portion of our cards. So they could have our rescue, or they do have our rescue, they have our mojo. Ooh, so they could do a double mojo here, which would be a pretty big power push. I don't know if it's going to be enough, or I don't know if it would be enough to win for them or not, but we can easily push the left or the right, depending on where they drop that resource. So they do have a mojo. They're going to be able to drop another mojo somewhere else as well. They pull their 1-cost cards back into their hand. Or at least one of them. Other than that, their hand size is full. So that we know that we have them beat already in the Superflow. So I think we do our Iron Man here. We of course don't draw into anything this turn because we are capped out. Our deck is capped out. So I think we do our Iron Man on the right hand side. That's going to propel us. We do have the 5 power Mysterio token. So right now we're at 15. That's going to propel it to 30. We're going to push this lane up to 15. With the Bishop buff, we're probably going to end up losing the cloning vats. If I was them, I would anticipate that they drop a mojo here. Maybe an Angela and a mojo. Either way, I don't think it's going to be enough to compete with the power level of our Iron Man. And if they really think about it, they know that we have the additional Iron Man that we can drop. It's going to, I mean, if they had an Enchantress, but that's kind of an odd add, and we still may be able to come up over their power level without the Iron Man bonus. The Iron Man bonus just really helps seal it home. Next up we have Flash, and I think we're going to drop our Ant-Man towards the end of the game, or the later part of the game. I intend to probably drop our Cosmo into Fisk Tower just in case they're running any kind of like movement style cards. We don't have to worry about Arrow pulling our cards over anymore if we have the Cosmo in the lane. But for the start of this game, I did want to shout out our new channel member, SillyBoy12. SillyBoy subscribed with a tier 3 subscription, which enables them to have a really cool badge next to their name. They get priority responses to comments. They also get early access to almost all of our videos. Sometimes we don't get a video edited and uploaded until right before it goes public, but as long as we get it edited early, they get early access to our videos and our deck lists. And so thank you so much, SillyBoy12, for joining us as a channel member and just supporting the channel. I appreciate you so much, and I'm so glad that you're here. And so they do a blade to spread their power out. They also do an Ant-Man here. So I think we do the same thing. Their Iceman hit our Wolfsbane, which makes it a little bit more difficult to drop, but it's not going to be a huge drop anyways. So I think we drop Cosmo into the Wakanda lane. That is going to tie us in Wakanda. They'll have to drop resources there if they want to push for the win in that location. They drop a Captain America, so we're probably going to give up on Fisk Tower. How cool would a Polaris be right here? Just pull their cards over. Ooh, so we get a pretty good upside here. We get the really high power Mysterio. So we have a couple of options. We have the high power Mysterio, which is going to buff up our Angela up to 3. It's going to push us up over to 6 power to tie this location, and it's going to put a fake token here. We could do Scarlet Witch if we don't want to change the location. We could change the random location in Fisk Tower, or we can stop the game from ending early. I think we have a pretty good chance of winning here. I changed my mind. We are going to go ahead and change TVA so that the game is not going to end. They do dump the rest of their cards, and so they don't play them necessarily optimally. They would have won this location. They would have ended up tying us here, and then we would have beaten them here, but they would have won this one by 3. It would have been very, very close, but we do extend the game to their surprise. We're going to go ahead and we will drop our Sera here. That way we can strategically do like a Wolfsbane and a Mojo next turn to try to cap out a location if they end up, so they don't drop anything because all they have is one card. If they have an Infinite, that feels pretty bad, but we can drop Mojo and we can drop Wolfsbane. That would push us up over their power level. We know that they can only drop 2 cards, but that feels like overkill in Fisk Tower because we're already at 6 power here. Maybe we go with Wolfsbane here, which we're at 6 power. This will put us at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it definitely pushes us up over here, and then we can drop our rescue here. We have a pretty good lead in X-Mansion. This will allow us to extend our lead in Wakanda and push a lead into Fisk Tower. So if they want to invest resources there, that's going to take away from the X-Mansion and the Wakanda play. So they did retreat later. We just overthought it. And so with that win, that means that we're 5-1 currently. We're going to go ahead and push for one more game. I think this is going to be a fairly standard, easy to climb deck. As long as you can kind of assess where you're at, snap when you have the advantage, retreat when you don't. I think it's going to be a pretty consistent deck. Next up, we have Dapper Beagle, and we've been running into them quite often recently. I think our last couple of videos, we've either had a match against them, failed a match against them. We've just played them in some way, shape, or form. We could drop Scarlet Witch here to change the miniaturized lab. That way it gives us a chance to drop our Bishop next turn. We could do a sneaky Mysterio play to buff up Bishop by 3. Is it worth it though? I think we're gonna go with it. What do they drop there? They drop a Lady Sif. So they're running an Agatha deck. Guys, if we lose to Agatha, it feels pretty bad. Okay, so Strange Academy is gonna push all of the cards into random directions at the end of turn 5. So I think instead of our Bishop early, we're gonna do a rescue. That is going to help us guarantee that we win the Asgard location. And so they drop a Daredevil, so they'll be able to see what we play on turn 5, but I think it's okay. I don't think that it's like gonna be hugely revealing or anything. I think we drop our Bishop and then we drop our Cosmo. Or do we drop our Cosmo into Asgard knowing that they're probably going to play cards here? Yeah, we'll do that for now. And then next turn we will drop our Mysterio. That way they're uncertain. If they want to lock down a lane with Professor X, it adds that level of uncertainty back into their their play. So we hit them with the Cosmo. Hopefully this is like a Green Goblin. So it would have been Magik, but we countered the Magik with our Cosmo. So we do end up drawing into our additional cards here. And it being turn 5, they're going to be able to see what we play. I think we go with the randomized method. So we will do a Mysterio token. It will finish capping out this lane. It will push a blank token here. We're then going to be able to do something like a Mojo and a Wolfsbane, which will allow us to keep 5 power here. They won't know for sure where that power is. They're not going to be able to use a Professor X. They're not going to be able to use a Hobgoblin anywhere but here, which if they use it here, it's okay. But they're not going to be able to lock down a lane with Professor X. They're going to have a really difficult time swinging those locations on us. So they end up snapping, and it doesn't give us a chance to respond. Which is kind of unfortunate. I don't know that we would have retreated, but I still would have liked the chance to respond there. So they drop 2 cards. So they drop something here. We'll see what power level they push in this location. Ooh, so they do a Spider-Man for next turn. And then they do a Swordmaster. So we know that currently we are winning every single one of the locations, depending on where Spider-Man goes. Yeah. So we're winning all of the locations. We do have 5 power here, so they're going to have to push I guess not. They just have to push 2 power here and then like a Hobgoblin or anything here. But they don't know for sure where that Mysterio token is, right? I guess we just hang out this turn and see what they end up dropping. So with this deck list, they typically, they could run a Shang-Chi, which would kill our rescue, but I don't think that's not enough for them to win Asgard. They could run a Killmonger, but I don't think that's enough for them. Okay, so they end up retreating. So we had a little bit too much power for Dapper Beagle, and the uncertainty of the Mysterio tokens made it hard to know where they should drop their power, and ultimately adds that uncertainty back into the game, whereas before they would have gotten that clarity from the Daredevil read. And so that is game 6. We are 6-2, and this deck list could be amplified with like a Mystique to copy your Iron Man on the last turn, but overall the deck list is incredibly solid. If you want to see more Sera gameplay, we are going to be live a couple of hours after this video releases for one of our lunch live streams. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave it a like, leave it a comment. I hope to see you in the live stream in just a little bit. This has been TLSG. Later, guys.